this 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the Granby Heights City Council meeting of Monday, November 21st, 2022. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Edwards.
Here.
Hatzafatinos. Here. Houston.
Here.
Kozak.
Here.
Panzera.
Here.
Smith. President Keeler.
President Keeler and Vice President Smith are both excused this evening, so I will be facilitating our meeting. The Mayor's joining us via audio call.
Director Dvorsky.
Here.
City Attorney Kuzan.
Excused.
Director Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Comments from visitors. I see no visitors to make comments. Very good. Moving on. We have a presentation regarding the Economic Development Strategic Plan. Director Culver.
Apparently I need this, change my settings real quick. Give me a minute. Computer malfunction. It's not responding to me at all anymore.
No worries. If you want to reset, we
Shuffle a little
can.
bit.
Yeah, we can shuffle and allow you to get that up and running. We'll postpone the presentation until Director Culver is ready for that, and let's proceed with old business item number 1.
Ordinance 2022-11, an ordinance to authorize the City of Grandview Heights to establish an opt-out governmental electric aggregation program for residential and non-mercantile consumers located within the incorporated areas of the City of Grandview Heights, to direct the Franklin County Board of Elections to submit the ballot question to the city's electors on the November 8, 2022 ballot and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. In order to proceed with discussion on this, we will need a motion to remove this item from the table.
And motion to remove the item from the table.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very well. Thank you. Councilmember Houston, would you like to have the floor?
Yes, so what I'd like to do is just allow for this to be a second reading this evening so that we have a little bit more time to gather a little bit more information related to the May primary and what other items might be on the ballot for that election. I tried to have a call in actually with the Franklin County Board of Election, waiting to hear back, and I think that will just help inform our decision, and so then we can make a motion at the next council meeting on third reading. And also would love to give our chair of the aggregation ad hoc committee, Bob Dvorsky, if you would like to, a chance to do a brief report on some of the work of the committee as well.
Thank you. We have, the committee has met twice. We met on September 21st and we met on November 14th. And we have created a shared folder for council members as well as committee members to look at various themes that we have discovered in our work, some of which is from the Public Utilities Commission, some from other cities such as Grove City, Columbus, Worthington, that have come before us or have are implemented. And we have collected an array of news articles. The committee members have shared some of their experiences and some of the materials that arrive at their homes in the mail of different offers. We will, so we've had a good exchange of ideas and information. We continue to assemble examples of what other people have done to date. The committee has also come up with a list of questions that have piqued their curiosity, that they seek more information about. And so I think as we move forward, the question is, where do we get some of that information from? And so we are going to reach out to some other leaders in other communities that might give us some ideas there. It's an industry that I suspect is going to have some different models that come up that people will figure out what they like and what they wish was different. And some of that might be things like the length of the term that initial agreement would be. And so we're going to try to reach out to people that have come before us a little bit. We also, since the committee took place, we had the November election, and we were monitoring other communities like Marble Cliff and Hilliard, and what they've done. Both of their ballot initiatives have passed. And then some of the other things that the committee's talking about is, when's the right time to implement this? And so trying to get our arms around, how often do they go out to auction? Is there some strategic benefit to certain times of the year and so forth? So it's kind of an educational process for us, and trying to anticipate challenges that might come up and the logistical issues of having a successful implementation.
Thank you.
Any other comments or objections to the request for this to be sustained as a second reading? Seeing none, please report this as a second reading. And moving on to item number 2.
Ordinance 2022-23, an ordinance to accept the dedication of 0.003 acres of real property to create a sidewalk easement and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you, Councilmember Hanson-Finos.
Yes, my committee met earlier this evening. This is in reference to the sidewalk in front of what everybody would know it colloquially as the chiropractor's building. So the sidewalk got expanded. There's going to be some streetscaping, trees, public-private partnership, all good things. This is the second reading, but seeing as a significant portion of the work has been done, I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules. It does not seem like it really is something that needs to wait for a third reading. I move to suspend.
Point of order, do we have enough members to
Don't we?
do that suspension?
Fine.
5, I believe, is the,
Okay,
Yes, it is 5.
yes.
okay, thank you.
So, that's a motion to suspend the rules for purpose of voting. Is there a second?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Do we, is this, would it be helpful to the administration to have that, or sort of indifferent?
It would. It
Okay,
would allow us to finish executing the agreement with you.
I will second then.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Edwards,
Yes.
Katsipatinos,
Yes.
Houston,
Yes.
Kozak,
Yes.
Panzera.
Yes.
The rules for ordinance 2022-23 have been suspended.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
It's a motion and a second. Would you call the roll for approval?
Katsipatinos,
Yes.
Houston,
Yes.
Kozak,
Yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-23 has been approved.
Thank you. That'll help us clean up the 12 or 14 items we'll have on the next agenda too. Old business item number 3.
Ordinance 2022-24, an ordinance to grant a 0.772 plus acre easement on a portion of certain city-owned property to facilitate access across a newly constructed school parking lot and declaring an emergency.
Call on PNA Chair Hanson Tafinos again.
Sort of the same thing.
Lynn.
We met on this earlier. I think everyone was here. It's a strip of land across the back part of the parking lot. Parking lot grew a little bit from the original plans, as the layman's terms to say.
It's actually where the parking lot overlaps the right of way on the Fairview
Yeah.
side a little bit, in order to get the width that they needed to provide the number of parking aisles and stalls that they needed. They needed just a little bit more room, and it doesn't cause any problems with the city's right of way, so we are recommending approval.
Any objection for suspension of the rules on the part of the administration?
If you're willing, it's pretty much housekeeping, and it would help us clear that off before the end of the year, so that'd be great.
I'll entertain a motion to suspend.
If I may, I would rarely object to suspension, but I actually believe it requires 6 votes, not 5. But just given that the city attorney is not present and you have already voted one in, it may be something to check.
I probably have the rules on my drive that I can look up on my Google Drive if you want.
That'd be fine. I've debated about this for 20 years, but I think the rules need to be clarified on this note, but it's okay.
Yeah,
Well, we can just.
I think it's 5 for emergency and 6 for suspending. However, I do not recall if you guys amended that at the last round. You may very well have.
You don't remember either. All right. Well, in that case, we'll move on. We'll record that as a second reading. And is there a motion to reconsider on item number 2? Okay, moving on. Liz, are you ready?
I hope so.
Thank you. If not, we'll keep going.
We'll give it a whirl.
Emily's going to strangle us.
That's first.
As long as it'll let me connect, we'll be in business.
Yeah. Well, we have to. No, but it's reconsideration.
I think I found it. Chair.
Yeah, what is it?
But,
This thing does not seem to like my computer, but I emailed it to Leilani so she can pull it up.
Okay. Okay, it still says 6 out of 7, which is just bizarre.
According to resolution 25-2021.
Yeah.
yeah, 3/4 vote of all members, 6 out of 7 was the last guidance that the city attorney gave us. And
Yeah.
so.
So do you want to
I
go?
still contend that that's
We'll make that.
crazy. That means nobody can be absent.
Well, it's 75% of 7 is 5.25.
Again, it's certainly not material, one way or the other. Thank you,
All right,
Renee.
yes, I
Sorry I
apologize.
mentioned it.
Oh, no, I'm glad you did,
We'll
because I
fix it.
don't want anything to be inconsistent. Go ahead.
So, just coming to you this evening with a little bit of an update on the progress on our economic development strategic plan. It's been almost a year since we kicked off at the Holiday in the Heights event last year. There's been a lot of movement this year, a lot of studies, very comprehensive plan. It has taken a little longer than I would expect future updates to take in the future, but appreciate your patience. I wanted to come to you this evening with just a quick update. I know there's a long agenda, but a quick update to highlight a couple of the things that will be coming forward, either on the agenda this evening or in the budget, to share some of the recommendations that are congealing and how they're starting to appear before you as execution items already. So lots of involvement. Appreciate everyone on council's involvement today. There'll be additional opportunities to review this. This is all in draft form right now. But lots of involvement both from folks around the city leadership, community members, developers, all kinds of different folks. So appreciate all that time. In terms of the structure of the ultimate report, it'll have chapters roughly aligning with this organization, a summary, kind of existing conditions in the About Grandview Heights section. We're looking at also state and regional context for economic development and how we kind of fit into that. Our existing economic conditions analysis, and then goals, strategies, and initiatives, which is really the meat, if you will, of the plan. So, and there's a couple items here that are circled because those are the ones that I'm going to touch on just briefly tonight. And there'll be another presentation later when there's not quite so much stuff in the agenda. So the summary chapter includes these pieces, an introduction, kind of framework, purpose of the plan, study process and participants, focus areas and questions, and key findings and goals. I'll go over that each one just briefly. Generally, the plan is happening. I think it actually happened at a really useful, I'll say, time, very dynamic time. We've had a lot of success over the past 20 years, reinventing ourselves here as a city. And then with COVID, there's a lot of change that has occurred with work from home movements, with a lot of tech sector investment in Ohio in general, with a major investment plan for the university just up the street at the Innovation District. So very dynamic time, and we've been able to incorporate and consider all of those things as well as some other regional planning conditions in the plan. The purpose of the plan, fairly simple, straightforward, really. Ultimately, it's to provide a great community, great place to live. Components related to that would be to provide good business opportunity in town, to make sure that the revenue supporting the city and the schools actually are both sustainable and resilient to be able to respond to things like we've just seen, and to support city services, facilities, and infrastructure. Study participants and process. So the bottom images include some of the participants. We were able to also incorporate considerations developed by MORPC for their first comprehensive economic development strategy, which is something that they put together because it facilitates access to certain federal funds for folks within their planning region. Jobs Ohio and what their sector targets are and how those might overlap, as well as One Columbus and what services they offer that we can take advantage of. Overall, the process included a lot of one-on-one interviews with probably, I'd have to count about 25 or 30 leaders in the community, lots of community engagement events, research related to either databases that exist or things that when we had our MORPC interns here, I had them literally go read through agenda for various councils around town to look at all the different programs that exist. We had an infrastructure study that's actually ongoing still, getting close. That's one of the reasons that we're kind of not quite there yet on the plan, is the infrastructure study is involved with the city of Columbus, has to do with capacity for sanitary sewer and how that supports development, so that's an ongoing piece. But doing revenue sources evaluations, and there's a couple items with that you'll see tonight. And then ultimately you're developing this kind of action framework, the goals, strategies, and initiatives. So we're kind of at the plan finalization stage right now, putting everything that we've learned and heard and discussed together for you. Focus areas and the big questions for each area. So the plan is divided up into these 6 rough categories as far as focus areas go. A comprehensive look to kind of understand how the city is situated in Central Ohio, and then focus areas specific to Grandview Yard as it starts to mature, the Goodale Mixed Use Corridor, Neighborhood Business District, Southern Gateway, and then the Grandview Heights, Clinton Township, JEDZ. The sub areas align with our community plan, so all of that remains consistent and easy to sort of cross-reference between the documents. The big questions, you can see there at the bottom, and knowing the agenda is long, I'm not going to go into these, but you guys can read them yourselves, and there'll be much more to read when it all comes together. But each one has a little bit different considerations, so we're kind of looking at them through those different lenses. Then the plan will go into each specific area. So this is an example. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just one, the example of the comprehensive findings. There's a different number of goals for the different areas depending on what presented itself as considerations. From a comprehensive perspective, there are these 4 goals, very, very broad. So the first one is to leverage what's going on in Central Ohio, right? So the second one is to continue to support the community as change continues to occur here in town. Make sure folks are aware and that things are done sensitively. Pursue redevelopment that is synergistic with the goals that we have for outcomes. And then ultimately, more tactically align our incentives and approval processes and things like that to align, which is you've seen happen in Grandview Yard, so just continuing to kind of execute that across the city.
Director Calker?
Yeah.
Is there a way to get the draft of this as a follow-up? I can't really read the screen,
Yeah.
so
I
might need an eye exam, but.
No.
Okay.
This is, it's a booklet,
Okay.
right, ultimately, so
Yeah.
it's not necessarily intended to see. Tonight, and where we're at with the development of the plan, the reason that I wanted to give a little bit of an update tonight has to do with specific items on the agenda. This will be distributed with the minutes.
Okay.
However, it's just all like a little
Yeah.
outtakes from the plan.
No, that'll be
right?
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yep, no problem. So that's kind of the summary, and that'll get expanded, but those are the pieces that'll be in the summary. The second chapter will have these pieces in there, kind of how we're situated in our very dynamic growing region, some baseline analysis of demographics and trends for us and for our communities that we stack up against, economic development history and successes, just to kind of just register where we've been and where we've gotten to so far. Current economic development programs that we have in the city, so that we can start to look at the ones that might really, with COVID, there's new strategies that are going to have to be figured out by everyone. So I'm starting to hear more conversation about that. And then a section on the JEDZ to kind of, again, kind of set the baseline for all those conditions. So this is an about Grandview Heights section. Then we're going to go, or we are going into state and regional context, so looking at economic development focuses at the state level, at the regional level, things that have programs out there that are being able to be supportive of our local businesses. And just as a for instance, I will say we've been participating recently with Jobs Ohio, I'm sorry, not Jobs Ohio, One Columbus, to incentivize one of our businesses here to grow. Our programs don't work so well because they have a very dynamic work from home situation, but the state programs work better. They're more comfortable with those as a business because they're not as worried about how dynamic they might be over time. Yep, so we're building those relationships. Regional incentive analysis having to do with competitor communities and how we situate ourselves in that matrix. Also looking at regional planning influences, things that I think you've heard a little bit about already with LinkUs and the potential new bus rapid transit stations nearby us and also nearby Clinton Township. Rapid 5 and what that might do for our waterfront on the Scioto, and the potential heritage trail. So looking kind of how those interact with economic development. And then last, emerging markets and growth opportunities kind of for Grandview Heights as a result of all these things. Fourth chapter goes into some of our risks and strategies for resiliency, industry and workforce diversification, kind of looking at that lens for the city, and then SWOT analyses both of the city as a whole and each sub-district that we're talking about. And then last, we get into the kind of response to all of that, the goals, strategies, and initiatives that we will put in place to support the direction that we want to take economic development in Grandview Heights. And I'm going to go over just a couple of these because of how they appear on the agenda here in a moment. And also to show you sort of the structure of the thing ultimately. So this slide will be part of the comprehensive section. Basically, the thing in dark blue at the top, there'll always be a goal, an overarching goal that we're trying to reach, and there's a few for each area or focus aspect. Within that, there are strategies. So in this case, there's 3, sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1, but in this case, there are 3 strategies that we're planning to use to achieve that goal. And then below each strategy, there can be, as you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 different initiatives to execute that strategy. So really the initiatives is where the rubber meets the road, that we're actually doing something. So each area will have a few of these slides related to the number of goals that we have for each section of the report. Diving into just a couple of those. So this I've flipped to, as an example, the Goodale Mixed-Use Corridor section of the report and pulled out, this is one goal, so, and I'll go ahead and read this because these are things related to the agenda this evening. Of note also, this is a very similar goal that appears in our neighborhood business district and our 7 gateway sections of the report, so they read very similarly. So retain and strengthen the diverse and eclectic business ecosystem along this mixed-use corridor. In the case of this particular goal for the Goodale mixed-use corridor, capitalizing on its creative and entrepreneurial maker-based business ecosystem, proximity to many mature and evolving adjacent assets, including infrastructure, nearby existing and planned neighborhoods, the central metropolitan area in general, nearby institutions, and Crew Stadium. So the strategy related to that is to continue to engage the property owners and community in forward-focused dialogue regarding existing and desirable future development patterns, complementary uses, potential evolution of this corridor, focusing on maximizing diverse business opportunities. And then ultimately the initiative is to undertake area planning so that this area can develop in the way that we would like to see it develop. This is for Goodale, which we completed a portion of last year. In the neighborhood business district section of the report, there is a similar recommendation for area planning, and that is a piece that will appear in the budget for request for funding for that for next year. Also within the Goodale mixed-use corridor economic development goals section of the report, there's a second strategy. The second strategy related to that higher level goal of maintaining and building the business environment down here has to do with supporting enhancement tools for revenue. Looking at TIFs, NCAs, special assessments, grants, low interest loans, different ways for the city to invest in aging infrastructure, augment capacity for things that we need, mitigate the flood zone, support redevelopment. And one way we start to do that is with these TIFs. So the recommendation, the initiative is to create the Goodale mixed-use TIF area, and again, that recommendation appears within these other sections in a similar way as well. So the reason we're moving forward with a couple of these initiatives before the plan is completely done is because they're time sensitive. Obviously, one needs to be budgeted for next year, and one needs to be put in place this year so that we can capture the incremental increased value for the properties, and we can talk a little bit more about that in committee. But just wanted to kind of give you a status update on how the report is progressing generally, and then hit on a couple of those items. You can expect many more action items to come out of the report as well. Happy to answer any questions. I know that was very quick. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of information.
What is the overlap or like practical application that this can facilitate for the JEDC? What kind of how far can you reach in the toolbox to assist in the JEDZ?
When you say this, can you give me a little bit more?
How will, obviously, Granby Heights benefits whenever there's economic development within the JEDZ
Yeah.
because of the revenue sharing.
Yep.
How will this be used by Clinton Township?
The plan overall?
Mhm.
Yeah. So so there's the JEDZ actually is undertaking their own economic development strategic plan right now. And that's another piece we've been trying to sort of line up. That's going a little slowly. I don't think we're gonna be able to hold our plan for that one to be finished. So it's gonna be fairly high level in this plan, but then with engagement with them as they go through their planning process. Ultimately, I think the thing that the city of Grandview Heights and Clinton Township could collectively benefit from is working together collaboratively with the city of Columbus to see where there are overlapping outcomes that everybody wants to see happen, and then negotiating for how to get those done. So that's probably the biggest recommendation, is to collaborate as a three-party group, because everyone has a piece of how that might work. And beyond that, there'll be other specific initiatives that you'll see as the plan develops.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Of course.
I mean, maybe you don't have this level of detail yet, but flood zone mitigation,
Yeah.
will that get into some specifics of what that looks like in our community?
Yeah, so there is a very specific thing that causes flooding over here. And really, it's relatively small area on Goodale now,
Mhm.
but there's a flat gate that allows reverse flow of the river to come up. And so if that can have essentially a backflow preventer put on it, it would potentially take some of that area out of the floodplain. So that would be, to move forward with the study for how to mitigate it, would probably be the action plan. It's gonna be in this document. To execute that would be something that would have to be funded and, figured out as part of a future second level action, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. That does make sense. I remember hearing something about that. That's helpful and interesting. A follow-up question, did climate or resiliency in the context of climate change and thinking about more often flooding events? sorts of things come into play?
Certainly there is that concern. We have heard from one of our engineering partners that FEMA continues to look at those flood maps, and there is additional consideration being given to how future events might change the risk in those areas. So that, again, kind of looking at that framework would be part of the study about how to fix this that would be recommended in this plan.
Thank you.
You may have said this, what's the estimated timeline for completion of this? And then follow-up question, provided approval in the budget, do you have a sense of when the area planning roundabout would begin for the neighborhood business district?
Yeah, next year, I'm planning my years and years these days, it feels like, but I think the second half of next year. I think the first half's gonna be very, very busy with both of the plans for the two new buildings. But those should be rolling in the architect's courts more so later in the year. And so as soon as we get those designed and they're off doing all their construction documents, we'll have an opening to start that. So roughly second half of the year.
Yeah. And then completion of this plan?
Completion of this plan, my goal, middle of December. It is in progress and moving along well now, so that's my goal.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate your hard work on that, along with the other tall tasks that you have assigned currently. If no other questions, we'll move on. New business item number 1.
Do you want to go back and
Reconsider?
yes?
I sort of do, but the That has to be brought by the person that made the motion, so.
Okay.
Oh, did I make the motion?
No.
It was me.
I made the motion to pay, yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to reconsider.
Move to reconsider the suspension of the rules on ordinance 2022-23
And approve.
and approval.
Second for reconsideration.
Second.
Thank you. Would you call the roll, please, on the motion?
Houston,
Yes.
Kozak,
Yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
Katsapatina.
Yes.
The suspension and approval of ordinance 2022-23 has been withdrawn.
Like we never even have. Thank you, Alani. Let's move on to new business item number 1.
Resolution 29-2022, a resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds in the amount of not to exceed $25 million for the purpose of constructing a facility for fire, police, and municipal services, furnishing and equipping the same, improving the site thereof, including infrastructure improvements and acquiring land and interests in land necessary in connection therewith, and authorizing and approving related matters.
Thank you. With our finance chair excused this evening, I'd like to call on Director of Finance, Ms. Miller.
This is a resolution that we need to pass by November 30th and submit to the county auditor so they can make sure that the taxes are collected next year. It's basically authorizing us to issue $25 million in bonds. You've approved the bond issue, the voters have approved the bond issue. This is just the next step to allow us to move forward with that. And it is a resolution.
So no suspension required. Any questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion to.
I would like to just, I guess I'd like to take on the sponsorship of this in Mr. Smith's absence. And also mention that we had a plan of finance meeting last week with our bond counsel, the internal professionals, and our outside consultant to really hammer out some more details. Not really totally reflected in here, but just to let everybody know that it's moving forward that way too.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for point of clarity, you said finance. You were referring to the administrative office, finance department, correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
correct.
Any further comments on this? We're considering passage this evening.
Move to approve.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
First and second, please call the roll.
Kozak,
Yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Smith, Edwards,
Yes.
Katsapatina,
Yes.
Houston.
Yes.
Resolution 29-2022 has been approved.
Thank you. New business item number 2.
Ordinance 2020-25, an ordinance to amend section 111.02 of the codified ordinances of the city of Grandview Heights, Ohio, to increase the salary of the city council members and the president of city council in accordance with section 3.5 of the charter of the city.
Thank you. I brought this forward. It's something we do have to visit every few years. It's not super difficult to understand that we do need to adjust our compensation in order, if it's desired by council, in order to keep up with the minimum credits available by OPERS on an annualized basis. Again, I'll call on Finance Director Miller to give a little bit more description of this, and then I'll follow up.
So this is something you are approving the next council's salaries. So you're not allowed to, or elected officials are not allowed to change their compensation while they're in office. So this is for future council members, and included in the packet is a comparison to other communities, and we thought it made sense. This was discussed 4 years ago when the council salaries were established, similar to other cities, to link it to the OPERS minimum earnings for 1 month of credit. So it's a minor increase really to get up to that level. For 2022, it's 8,362, and you guys are at 7,800, so it's not a huge increase, and I think it's a nice way to set the compensation. We also addressed in it additional compensation for the president of city council because there's additional duties with that role. So we included an additional 20% of the normal council salary for the person in that position.
Very good. So just for, again, a touch of clarification, it would not apply to anyone who is presently elected. If one sitting on council is re-elected, then this would be initiated. So it's not to, quote, new council members per se.
Right.
It's to those that will be elected in the next cycle and further. So it just can't effectuate any current term on council. Obviously, as sponsor, I support this. I think it helps neutralize some of the, even though it's really rather mild at this point, some of the politicization, the politics of it. Just because it's ultimately probably where we'd end up anyway in order to seek that minimum credit. It's a good metric to tie it to, in my opinion, and ensures a certain durability and kind of takes it off the table. Now, if future councils can revisit this whenever they wish, whether it's this body or a next set, and can modify this in any way they wish. But I think this is a good path forward based upon the capacity of the city, the very much increased responsibilities and roles that we've had through the growth of Granby Heights over the past decade, and so I'm supportive. Be happy to entertain any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
And that's a really clarifying question. So currently, we, for our service and our compensation, we are not getting any credit toward the Oprah's retirement because we don't meet the threshold for salary. Is that correct?
You don't
You
get a
get
full
partial
point.
credit.
What is the partial? If you don't know, that's
Probably like 0.96,
Yes.
because it's $500 less than full credit.
Yeah, it's 0.93.
so it still accumulates. It's just not accumulating. We're
It's
not
just
getting the
not on
maximum
an annual.
benefit.
Correct.
So if you serve 10 years, you don't get credit.
You get 9 years of credit.
Right.
Okay.
So those thresholds are not likely to affect anyone,
Yeah.
but there are, unless you've put in to like full retirement, correct? But there are those both in the community in the past and presumably in the future that might already have been involved in municipal government at some point. And those are important elements to continue to attract good qualified candidates and servants for the public good, so.
And I have a question.
Mhm.
How often historically do you review this? Is it every 2 years or?
4 years,
Oh, 4 years,
probably,
okay.
and we've probably skipped a couple 4-year
Okay.
cycles in the past too. If anybody really wants to know, when I started, it was $100 a month,
Yeah, I think we did have an adjustment in
because it was in the 1800s.
my time frame. So within the last 5 years, we've had one very slight adjustment.
Yeah, I think it went from 72 to 78 last time. So just, again, it's a way to kind of tie it to a metric that's reliable and meaningful to those that will serve in the future. Very well, we'll consider this a second reading, I believe, correct?
First reading.
Thank you, first reading. Item number 3, new business.
Do you want to assign it?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to assign it?
No, I think that considering the relevance of this, that it should be considered, continued as council as a whole.
Council as a whole.
Yeah.
Ordinance 2022-26, an ordinance amending the salary of the mayor of the city of Grandview Heights in accordance with section 2.3 of the charter of the city.
Thank you. I have sponsored this as well. Pretty much same pitch. in the historic past, the mayor's position was seen as a little bit more than a volunteer position. That has changed dramatically over the past 3 decades, and it's now something that is in very high demand in terms of both qualifications, expertise, experience, and willingness to serve. Oftentimes, those in the professional environment that live within our city simply don't want to, reduce their salary as significantly as would be required in order to consider this position, and yet they may be very, very qualified. So I think we have a pretty good understanding of today's professional salary environment. We do have some data here that's been collected by finance that reflects other strong mayor municipalities within Central Ohio. And if there's any questions about these, I'd be happy to entertain questions. Seeing none, any comments from the finance director?
No, once again, this is for the next mayor, the next elected term of the mayor. So this doesn't impact anybody currently in office. We always do it in advance.
I do have a question. I was wondering, because I know years ago when I talked with Ray at IFP, I thought that was his full-time job. He's like, oh no, I had this other work I was doing and I'm still doing that work. Is this, because I know it's evolved over the years, so is the position now, like before it used to be considered your part-time, or as you're talking volunteer position, is it now considered a full-time position and hence the increase?
I think that's somewhat subjective. I'll answer it from my perspective, absolutely. The mayor had, Mayor DeGraw, when the evolution of the city has brought about a much higher level of expectation on the part of the mayor. In other forms of government that aren't strong mayor, typically you see the mayor not necessarily as a figurehead, right? It's still very strong in terms of the leadership capacity and the role, but not engaged in the actual fundamental management and running of the city. I think that the term CEO is appropriate because there are 70+ employees that do report in one form or another to the mayor as opposed to a city manager. So under our charter, that is that's the position and the responsibility and the level of leadership that our mayor needs to take. I certainly don't want to discredit any previous mayors. That's not the point of my current position or a position on this topic. But it is easy to understand that the number of regulations, requirements, restrictions, and expectations have escalated dramatically over the past 20 years, potentially over the past 30 years. And I think that if you reached back into the 70s or 80s and spoke with one of the mayors or council members that served during those eras, they would say, yeah, it really wasn't, it was no big deal. The mayor showed up when they wanted to, and they came and went, and the department directors kind of ran their own thing. The level of scrutiny that local municipalities are subject to now, and the level of support that's required to keep them functioning, I think is dramatically different than previous generations. That's it's also been brought up, I think, specifically by Council President Keeler, and I really am in strong agreement on this, that at the very minimum, just by median income, it seems like we should support at least an income that allows the mayor, the CEO, the opportunity to live in the city. And as we know, this is, it's challenged now. And so we'd like to continue to pursue good talent, those with expertise and those with qualifications. And I think a professional salary is in order to continue that. Any other comments, questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I would actually, this is the mayor, I would like to just reiterate, this is a strong mayor form of government. The mayor has the ultimate responsibility under the charter for all of the city, all of the decisions that are made that might cause harm, liability. It is the director of safety. All of those things are on the mayor, and it is a 24-hour operation and responsibility. I also, to the point, I worked very closely with Mayor DeGraw, and he certainly did have other sources of income. And I guess I would point out that if you look at the history, Grandview's never paid its mayor enough to feed their family without that. So I guess it's, you can say it was part-time, but it wasn't the salary that was part-time or the responsibility that was part-time. I think those are two different things. And the third thing I will say is that this is very much tied up in, this is just a suggestion for the future, and I don't think it comes around for 4 or 5 more years, but this is so tied up in the form of government that I would suggest to depoliticize this the next time around. It be referred to the Charter Review Commission for consideration and evaluation, and just to have somebody who's not elected look at this, to give it more, to really validate what the analysis is, and provide more color to it.
That's a good suggestion there. Any further comments? Please record this as a first reading and consistent with the previous agenda item. I think that considering the relevance to all of council and to all leadership, this should be considered as a matter before council as a whole. Thank you. Item number 4, new business.
Ordinance 2022-27, an ordinance amending the salary ordinance of the city of Grandview Heights and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you. I'm gonna, this means mayor and budget season. Good start.
Yep. Well, and I can talk about this now, or defer I guess I can talk about the first 2 and then defer the third one in there to the budget discussion, which is later in the agenda. Generally, adjustments to the salary ordinance are market driven when you're talking about adjusting a range, and that's what these first 2 are, the public works coordinator and building inspector, both being in high demand, particularly building inspection. We have, we have operated, actually, we've been down an inspector for almost a year. We are trying to get fully staffed here. I think we're almost there. But in doing so, we have really evaluated the market. The third one is a new position that I would, if I may, just discuss it when I talk about the budget in a few minutes here, or I can accelerate that discussion now. It's your pleasure, Mr. Panzera, and the rest of council.
Go ahead. I know we're going to have some committee meetings to support this item for the next month and a half or month. But if you'd like to give a brief intro on that new position, I think we're willing to hear.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, several new positions. This is one of them that needed amendment to the salary ordinance. Planning and community development was essentially bifurcated from essentially what was the Department of Administration in the last administration, because the functions are both different specialty and really just more depth. Director Kelker spoke to earlier, gave you an idea of the many strategic, focused, forward-looking projects that we have that we really want and I think need to move forward post-pandemic. Really important, with the revenue, there's the short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and these I think have really big implications for the mid-term and long-term of both our city's physical development and revenue development. And so we want to make this a priority now while the iron's hot. we are looking at entry-level professional. You have the salary range there. We have used interns extensively in the last couple of years, and believe this is, at this point in time, this is a better way to go because of a couple of reasons. One, the qualifications, the other is continuity, frankly. But that's the gist of it. And generally speaking, a lot of the work that we would anticipate would be ongoing implementation of economic development plan, as well as other, it's kind of the same discussion we had with Director Lee last year. If you're a department of one, you're really doing everything from top to bottom. And if you can't delegate you're not giving the city your best self because you're doing things that are far below your pay grade, so to speak. And that would allow Director Kelker to have someone qualified to delegate to those time-consuming type of tasks that otherwise she would be doing herself. So that's the gist of it.
Okay, we will, unless there's direct questions.
Just a quick
Go ahead.
one. So this position would be a direct report of Director Kelker of yours. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that specific line item within the ordinance? Very well. Let's record this as a first reading. It'll be assigned to Planning and Administration. Thank you. Item number 5, new business.
Ordinance 2022-28, an ordinance to approve supplemental appropriations for the city's share of the Bobcat Way Fairview Avenue Transformation Project, or the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Finance Director Miller for intro on this.
This is to pay for, we were awarded an OPWC grant loan combination. The city has a matching portion, and that part needs to be appropriated. We wanted to do it in 2022 so we could get the contract signed now because they want to start construction at the very beginning of 2023, make sure they order the supplies. The contractor doesn't want to do that until they have a signed contract, so we want to get the appropriations in place. We're going to ask that you suspend the rules and approve it at the second reading on December 5th. And you can just see, we have to move a couple of line items around, but the total amount we're asking for appropriation is $335,000.
Very well. Any questions? This will be assigned to Finance. Seeing no questions, let's proceed. Please record that as a first reading. I'll remind everyone to please try and engage in any direct questions to the Finance Department or Finance Chair or the Mayor so that we can have the full level of knowledge required to consider this at second reading in December. Item number 6, new business.
Ordinance 2022-29, an ordinance to make annual appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Greenview Heights, State of Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023.
Budget time. Megan?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for your patience. If you haven't heard, COVID got me again. I'm on the mend and hoping to have a full house here for Thanksgiving, but that doesn't seem super likely right now. So I am pleased to present the budget for 2023 here. I really want to thank staff, both the Finance Department and administrative staff and all the departments who assisted with this process. It is a lengthy process. It starts in the summer. It's an ongoing dialogue. There's really not a lot of surprises by the end of it, but it does require sometimes hard decisions and trade-offs, and it did this year as well. You were provided with the budget books. Hopefully you got those in advance of the meeting. And we have, the first note I want to make is, again, thanks to you, Director Miller, we have improved the format, and there's a lot more data in there, and it's really, really user-friendly, and I really hope that some of our residents can, look at it, understand it, interpret it, and ask good questions about it, and so I feel like that's continuously improved. High points is all I'm really going to hit today. It's the same format as the last few years. If you, let me talk about the revenue side as an overview first. Obviously, we have some decrease in income tax, particularly withholding due to working from home. It does remain unstable and volatile. nothing you haven't heard from Director Miller. We are very grateful to the voters for helping us stabilize, at least with respect to our most critical projects with issue 32. And we do feel, really, in reflecting on all this, that the long-term outlook is good, though it is going to continue to be bumpy in the short term and the midterm. The estimated revenue next year is fairly flat, and so we have, again, taken a conservative approach on the expense side, really thinking hard about what will take us the farthest with respect to operations and capitals, with not threatening our reserve. That's the word I was looking for. So again, philosophically, one of the philosophical high-level things that we approached this with was to protect the $10 million reserve so that we can finish the project. We took a very, very incremental and very conservative approach on capital. Director Kelker mentioned doing some planning as to sewer capacity. Being a 100-year-old community, our sewer, water, road, et cetera, infrastructure, it's all old, it all needs maintenance, and it's all extremely expensive. And so I really appreciate that all department heads were thoughtful. And if you look at the capital budget, which I know is not up for a reading, but I'm not going to have a whole heck of a lot to say beyond this. It's very conservative. We really are focusing on grants, and have been in the last few years, to get large infrastructure projects done. Now, of course, not all of our infrastructure projects qualify, but here next year we have hopefully qualified for the OPWC First Avenue grant loan combination, and I just heard today that preliminarily we did qualify. So I really just want to point out that we're very strategic about how we are approaching our general fund and our capital dollars. On the expense side, tab 4 is really where you'll find most of the meat and bones for our operations. And on page 17 and 18, you have a breakdown by department. That's actually really reflective and a good kind of overview. And then for the capitals, you will refer to Appendix E. In addition to protecting our reserve and being conservative with capital, the other main focus was really investment in improving services, and moving strategic projects forward with staffing. Two things. One was the planning and community and development position that I mentioned, and I won't belabor that again. The other one is safety. So let me talk about police first, and again, you can review in the boxes under tab 4. Anytime there's a box, it's kind of items of note, things that are changed. Some of them aren't, large in magnitude, but that gives you a kind of a glance of what's different from last year. So you will see that we are indeed adding a deputy chief this year for police. This is actually an effort that started last year. I believe we added it to the salary ordinance last year, but we did not get very far. Very intense need in this department for depth. There needs to be a chain of command. The chief needs to be able to go out of town, go to a meeting, go on vacation, and redundancy is needed, and we just don't have that now. It's not really good practice to take a patrol officer or a detective and put them in that role, because then they're not able to focus on their job, and then you have kind of almost a challenge with respect to the union versus management. So this effort is really overdue. It frees up leadership, and it frees up patrol and detectives to all focus on their jobs and, again, utilize their time the best in the service of the city. On the fire side, also a long-standing need, actually going back 3 chiefs, is to fully staff all 3 shifts. Right now, we have 1 shift with 6 individuals, and that was when Anthony Busaletto, I believe, when Anthony Busaletto came, and Chief Shaner brought forward a request to fully staff that, anticipating Anthony would be, and is actually right now deployed at some point. But the other 3 have 5. Our minimum staffing is 4. This creates several challenges for us, and it's a dramatic increase in service if we can fully staff those other 2 shifts. And let me just explain a little bit. First of all, our minimum staffing is 4. When people have illnesses, vacations, that sort of thing, with shifts of 5 people, you're often on minimum staffing, and that really hamstrings what you can do. one of the things we do is, because of this staffing that we have, is we can't take an engine and a medic run at the same time. We are in a either or, not a both situation, if that makes sense, if we get an engine run and a medic run. And this, in addition to not providing the best service that we can, also creates real challenges with mutual aid and the regional environment when they dispatch. And so that Granby Heights is actually the only jurisdiction remaining who does it this way, who does the cross manning. And we need to essentially come up to the regional standard and fully staff all 3 shifts to kind of get with the program and be, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, pulling our weight. We provide great service, and I feel very strongly about this. The chief and I have talked about it since he started, and again, both of the police and the fire service have been waiting a long time for these changes. So I will bring both chiefs and Director Kelker to the committee meeting where we discuss this. If we could arrange that specifically so that works for everybody, I think it'll be very effective. I think you probably will have some questions, particularly about fire, to understand it. It took me a while to understand it, but I think it is important that council understands how this works and how this makes it better, and how also adding 1, not 2 medics does not solve the problem. So that's really the highlights that I wanted to mention. You have the books. I look forward to hopefully what is an in-person robust discussion at the next meeting.
Yes, with first reading here, thank you for detailing some of that explanation for the increase, the proposed increase in fire personnel. Just to impart a little bit of verification on what you're describing, the weakness that we have right now is on certain shifts, we are unable to provide, let's call it, the reasonable expected mutual aid availability if we're on a run. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, depending on if we're on a fire run versus a medic run,
right.
Yes. And that's that. It's also we're unable to provide our city the both. We can do an either or, but not both. You know, and again, people are you often don't have full staffing on a given shift, but we have no flexibility when our minimum staffing is 4. So this would in effect require changing it to 5, and that'll be a negotiation with the union. But this is something they support. Frankly, this is something they've been trying to do for. I mean, I would say, Mr. Panzera, probably since you've been here. It goes back several chiefs, and Chief Shaner made the case when Medic Busaletto came on, but I know that his intent was to do it on all 3 shifts. And if you only, let's say you added 1 medic, it still would not, it almost makes it worse, because Columbus has to do some sort of workaround dispatching solutions. And so they're doing it for Grandview now, most of the time. And then if you made it like so that 2 shifts would be fully staffed, but the other wouldn't, it would be impossible to keep track of, and it wouldn't be done well. And I think the chief will explain to you that it's actually becoming more difficult with automated dispatch and those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So it's not really even solvable.
Understood. And under the premise of mutual aid, because all of us, I think, would probably get this from our constituents or from residents from time to time. Well, why do we need XYZ coverage if we can always call Columbus, or if they're going to be there, they're just on 3rd Avenue? And that single question is they're right, it's true. But if I can interpret this for you, Mayor, if we don't continue to provide the adequate amount of mutual aid, then those mutual aid agreements can decay and deteriorate, and that's certainly nothing that either jurisdiction would want, nor would our residents. So I'm sure
no, I think I
agree
with that. We're not, if I don't want to be seen as not pulling our weight, we have fantastic service, so we really need to just staff it right.
So we'll continue that and look forward to both chiefs to participate for some questions and additional clarification. Anything else, Mayor?
those are the highlights. Those are the things I thought that were most kind of impactful. I think along with the planning and community development specialist, we do have some investment in, as I think it was Councilman Edwards, somebody asked earlier about area planning. Frankly, part of this is so that we can move these forward and also be able to move forward. You can't do everything all at once. And if you have another staff member, it really dramatically increases what you can do at once. So that's really part of the gist of it, is to put more dollars towards both the staff and the project themselves for implementation.
This, as alluded to, this is going to go to finance for some further conversation and deep dive into the entire budget. Any initial questions from council? Seeing none, thank you. This will be assigned to finance. We look forward to your continued participation there. And let's
Thank
record
you.
that as a first reading and move on to new business item number 7.
Ordinance 2022-30, an ordinance to make appropriations to various departments within the City of Grandview Heights municipal government to purchase equipment and make capital improvements in 2023.
So this is the capital portion of the upcoming budget. Mayor, if you have any direct prioritized attention we should be giving, we'd be happy to hear that.
Again, it's in Appendix E. I think you'll note that there's dollars for the new park. Really routine items and a lot of thought given, as I said, to, what can wait, how can we get through and make sure we launch this project successfully and not cannibalize our reserve. And also a lot of attention has been given, as you heard earlier, long-term infrastructure investment. We've got some other items on the agenda probably next to talk about some funding strategies for those infrastructure investments. So we really have, zoomed out and really looked at this not in so much a detailed way, but as more of a strategic, long-term approach and developing those funding, those revenue sources. So both, I think nothing of note other than what I've said. You guys can read it, the 5-year plan's there, and I don't think anything surprising is in there actually. Other than I think we got our grant, yay, $2 million grant loan combination, actually $500,000 in grant and the rest being loan. Again, very similar to what we had last year and I think the year before as well.
For,
The First
are you
Avenue?
referring to?
First out.
First.
Yep.
Thank you. I know this always includes consideration for new rolling stock. And one of the things that I'm sure all of us have had to, or have been asked, is when are we going to contemplate the use of electric vehicles? So I know that's going to come up during conversation. Hopefully there's been consideration from the department heads and that they can substantiate any decision that they're making, whether it be in the EV direction or in traditional internal combustion engines. Any questions? Wonderful, good, thank you. Megan, any comments?
No.
Thank you. Please record that as a first reading. It'll be assigned to finance for tons of fun and excitement. Let's move on to item 8, new business.
Ordinance 2022-31, an ordinance to establish the Goodale mixed-use TIF area, declaring the improvement of certain real property located in the city of Grandview Heights, Franklin County, Ohio, to be a public purpose, declaring such property to be exempt from real property taxation, designating specific public infrastructure improvements that, once made, will directly benefit the parcels for which the improvement is declared to be a public purpose, requiring annual service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, authorizing compensation payments to the Grandview Heights City School District, and providing related authorizations pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Sections 5709.40B 5709.42, 5709.43, 5709.832, and 5709.85.
Thank you, Alani. You know if you need a recess after that. We have two more that are going to be pretty similar, so take, consider wisely what you need to. Thank you. Liz or Mayor, who wants to open this?
I think the sponsor is prepared to open it, actually. We attended a meeting this morning.
Ryan, I apologize. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure, yep. This and the next two pieces of legislation help to advance our emerging economic development strategy and also the 2019 community plan by placing a tax increment financing district on 3 areas the city identified as key areas of opportunity for future improvement. The areas that you guys will see come before you are the Goodell mixed-use TIF area, the Southern Gateway TIF area, and the neighborhood business TIF area. Applying the tax increment financing tool to these areas will allow the city to capture the improved value of structures and parcels in these areas in order to make needed improvements to public infrastructure. And then the list of potential improvements that are possible are included in the packet. And just a note, something that we talked a little bit about is a non-school TIF. And so I'll invite Director Kelker and Director Miller to share other pertinent information.
I'll go. Sure. And I appreciate that. I think you really captured the main important points of these 3 pieces of legislation. They obviously contain all of our existing older, smaller parceled areas of town. It's difficult often to gather financing to support individual projects when they're in these smaller broken up parcels. So this will let us aggregate money over time to support those kinds of projects. It is, as Councilman Edwards mentioned, a non-school TIF, so the schools will continue to receive the same amount of money that they would ever have received off of all of the parcels in the district. Potentially more, because this will help spur economic development in those areas, which will then allow additional money to flow to the schools as well as obviously to the city. It's a 30-year TIF, each one, a 30-year TIF district, and gets into a little bit of detail, but each parcel can be triggered at a different time when development occurs. So we'll be triggering couple dozen of them early on, and then we'll be able to reserve that full 30 years for each parcel as they develop over time. So it's a very flexible and robust tool that will help create funding streams for infrastructure improvements in these 3 districts. There'll be separate funds set up for each one, so the money will be traceable and able to be dedicated towards the list of improvements that are in the packet, which are very broad, but cover all the things that the city might need to invest in to spur economic development and support the redevelopment and investment in private parcels around town. So it's very exciting.
This is a tool that several other cities in central Ohio have used, and it's a great way for us to build up some money that will, from certain parcels, that'll help us take care of the infrastructure in those areas. So it's a great tool, and it's a good, for looking ahead, it's a really great way for us to fund future projects. And it doesn't impact the school, which is great too. We don't have to enter any agreements with them. We notify them, and then we're pretty much done.
So, for the class, if it's described as a non-school TIF, which isn't a great label because it kind of implies the opposite. But I understand, we understand the labeling and the purpose. So the revenue sharing that the school would, at the time of that improvement and the reassessment, whatever the percentage the schools are receiving at that time is continued, or is there another quotient that gets applied to that.
Yeah, there's literally no change.
Okay.
If there wasn't a TIF, they'd get an amount, and if
Okay.
there is this TIF, they'll get an amount. There's literally no change to their revenue.
And unlike Grandview Yard, the county will pay the school directly. So the school will get the money directly from the county each settlement. Right now, Grandview Yard money comes to the city and then we distribute it. And this one, it's even cleaner. They just get the money from the county.
And is there a priority element of infrastructure that has focus, the highest level of necessity as we proceed with this?
I'm sure there will be competing priorities. I would not want to hazard a guess at that, honestly, right now.
Okay.
Something that, however, is being studied also for our city engineer and the city internally. There's been a work group who's been working on developing a list of infrastructure investment needs broadly for the city, and those will get honed as it becomes more apparent. You know, sometimes, as the mayor was mentioning, sometimes something might get ahead, like we might want to do this thing, but there's no grant funding or loan funding for it, whereas this other thing we want to do does have that funding available. So there's lots of considerations for what floats to the top. I will say, from my perspective, there's long-term investment in our sanitary sewer system is really important to support development. And then public realm investments, particularly in the neighborhood business districts and especially in the heart of our city in on Grandview Avenue and First Avenue. There are some investments to the public realm that would be great to make while the economy is very healthy here in Central Ohio. So those would be a couple that would be, you know, up on my list.
In terms of underground infrastructure specifically, the water and sewer system poses kind of a hard throttle, if you will, that won't allow certain advancement in development because the capacity is threatened at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yes,
easy
that's
to-
one of the challenges that this is meant to address. And I will say, TIFs are intended to support the areas that they are covering. So, for instance, if there's a very specific improvement to the Goodale area or to the neighborhood business district area that only benefits that area, only revenue from the TIF related to that area can be used for that. If there's something that benefits the entire city, then they could be aggregated to be used for something like that.
Thank you for the additional description. There's essentially three parallel pieces of legislation here on the agenda tonight. They all deal with the exact same modeling, just in a different area. These are, so I'd love to entertain any questions at all at this time, and then we can scoot through the other two with a little more efficiency. Anyone?
What kind of information, do we have to read through all of 9 and all of 10?
Yes.
Do we?
Yes,
Okay.
they have to be read, but I'm just trying to promote discussion if there's any questions, because they're all the same.
Yeah, while they're read, I'm gonna step out to the ladies' room, the
No
restroom,
objection.
and not call a recess. Otherwise, I think we need to call a recess,
Yes.
unless others need a recess. Okay,
Uh,
I don't have any questions. I look forward to discussing it more in committee.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I just have another point to make because I can't let it go. Our sewer capacity is essentially full, and just informationally for
Well
you
stated.
all, we have, what's that?
Well stated.
Yes, don't flush. No. We've sat in a lot of meetings talking about this, but there's a very large project. There's actually 2 large projects over on Olentangy River Road that, though they are going to dramatically increase capacity, in some ways they're not really going to help us, as I understand it. And if you've seen kind of in Dowdy Field and the lane torn up on Olentangy River Road, there's been articles about this recently. The Lot Tunnel is one of them. The other one is a siphon that I think maybe is in design or something. I'm not even sure. But, you know, I guess the point is that this is a big, huge challenge for the region, and we don't control it, but we have a huge stake in it. So it's something that's going to have to play out, but it is something that is, as Director Kelker said, really critical to our future. And I think if you just kind of looked at the numbers, it's like, well, no more development until you get more capacity. In reality, it doesn't work exactly that way, but it is a serious concern. So I just wanted to mention those projects. If you want to read more about them, there's been articles in the paper recently. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This will be assigned to Econ. Thank you, Councilman. Sorry, I just want to call you Ryan. That's how it works. Thank you, Ryan, for leading this, and we will consider this the first reading, assigned to Econ, and let's continue with item number 9, new business.
Ordinance 2022-32, an ordinance establishing the Southern Gateway TIF area, declaring the improvement of certain real property located in the city of Grandview Heights, Franklin County, Ohio, to be a public purpose, declaring such property to be exempt from real property taxation, designating specific public infrastructure improvements that, once made, will directly benefit the parcels for which improvement is declared to be a public purpose, requiring annual service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, authorizing compensation payments to the city, to Grandview Heights City School District, and providing related authorization pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 5709.40B, 5709.42, 5709.43, 5709.832, and 5709.85.
Thank you, Lilani. Please record this as a first reading, and it will continue to be assigned to Economic Development Committee. Item number 10, new business.
Ordinance 2022-33, an ordinance establishing the neighborhood business TIF area, declaring the improvement of certain real property located in the city of Grandview Heights, Franklin County, Ohio, to be a public purpose, declaring such property to be exempt from real property taxation, designating specific public infrastructure improvement that, once made, will directly benefit the parcels for which improvement is declared to be a public purpose, requiring annual service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, authorizing compensation payments to the Grandview Heights City School District, and providing related authorizations pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 5709.40B, 5709.42, 5709.43, 5709.832, and 5709.85.
Thank you. Please record this as a first reading. It is additionally going to stay assigned in the Economic Development Committee. And if you go real slow, we'll start new business item number 11. Just start real slow. Ordinance 2022 dash.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
But with these TIFs, so the school still gets their money, but then the other money that the city would get is now going to be pooled to make these infrastructure repairs. So it's sort of, we're taking a hit on our income, okay, it's just being reassigned. The funds are being reallocated for this other purpose. Also property taxes.
On the property taxes, that's correct.
On property taxes, yes. Our commercial areas, I think what's important to understand, our commercial areas of the acreage in the city are a small portion. The majority of the land area in the city is residential. There's a lot of improvement that happens in our residential districts that isn't eligible for capturing in a TIF because it's not allowed by law. So real estate taxes from everything go to support a lot of different things. The city collects some, the schools collect a large portion, and then a number of other organizations, the zoo, MRDD, the library, collect also portions. It is the incremental value on only the specific commercial parcels that we're identifying here, so value that might get added in the future from the all of the revenue other than the school revenue for real estate taxes, just an incremental value that would be applied to this fund to create funding for infrastructure that would support the development. Without that funding to support the redevelopment, it would never happen. So those organizations, other organizations would never see any additional funding. So it's a temporary borrowing, if you will, of and collecting of some real estate taxes in order to work for the common good for all of those organizations and support increased development and investment in the city, so that ultimately everybody wins.
Okay, thank you.
As just somewhat of a further explanation, since you've asked, there's a slight technicality. Those other organizations would receive an increase in revenue within the inside millage that's being collected. So as their value, it gets real complicated to go down this road, but as their value increases, the inside millage is, it's constant, but the amount of dollars that are paid in those taxes goes up slightly. So it's not an absolute flat line for the 30 years. It will increment slightly, but if I'm correct, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's just for the county.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's what I mean, not for anyone else, because that's all voted.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, anywho, and then logically and practically, the reason that cities or municipalities pursue this in general is to increase the development, and as you know, that means effectively more staffing, typically. Professional staffing is usually what we're going to target. That's the highest level of return. It does take a mix of, various elements of like an economic ecosystem to make any new development work, but generally speaking, the city's going to make up its revenue that it may have otherwise left behind by the improvement of the property. It's going to make it up because now there's income taxes there that would not have been on those parcels if we didn't do the TIF.
I understand, thank you. But you're saying we're still gonna get the same amount of income tax if this is just on the,
Property
like,
tax.
or a property tax, excuse me. This is just
Yes.
on the,
Incremental value.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Correct. So the city's impacted as well in a sense, because we are dedicating incremental value and collecting it, but we're also adding other funds from, other organizations, frankly. Again, you're looking for ways to help everybody, and this is a tool that's available, so that we can do some of the things that need to be done, so we can help everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's continue with item 11, new business.
Ordinance 2022-34, an ordinance to grant the city of Grandview Heights a sanitary sewer easement with respect to 0.168 acre of real property located along Bobcat Avenue within the Grandview Yard and declaring an emergency.
This seems relatively boring. I'm just going to send it to P&A. Please report that as the first reading. Item number 13.
Ordinance 2022-35, an ordinance to grant the city of Grandview Heights a sanitary sewer easement with respect to 0.110 acres of real property located along Bobcat Avenue within the Grandview Yard and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Lilani, and I apologize. I called for 13, so you count that as 12. Likewise, unless there's any introductory statements or questions, we'll assign this to P&A for consideration. Please record as first reading. Item number 13 now.
Ordinance 2022-36, an ordinance to grant the city of Grandview Heights a sanitary sewer easement with respect to 0.031 real acres of real property located along Bobcat Avenue within the Grandview Yard and declaring an emergency.
This seems equally boring. We'll assign it to P&A and report it as a first reading. Fun. Sewers. Easements. Item number 14, new business.
Ordinance 2022-37, an ordinance to grant a 0.001 acre encroachment and a 0.007 acre encroachment to an easement originally granted to the city easement by NRI Equity Land Investments LLC owner to facilitate a private construction project to be known as the Devon Apartments within Development Block 9 of the Grandview Yard and declaring an emergency.
I do have a question on this.
I could give you just a super quick overview on all four of those. The first three, it's really one sewer that lines Bobcat and whatever it is, Williams, I don't know. I'm forgetting, but anyway, one sewer that crosses three parcels. So that is a easement being granted by NRI essentially to the city so that our sewer can be in their private property. It's a new sewer. It's the only place it would fit. The road was packed. So when this was originally done. And this easement is something that just, it really should have been done a while back, but we're kind of catching up with housekeeping. The encroachment then, so private owner wants to now build a new building, which we would like to have them do as well. They need a tiny encroachment into that easement that they granted us in order to build their building. So collectively, the conditions aren't changing with regard to the easements that are being granted to the city. The encroachment's really the only new piece, if you will, and it's minor. Our city engineer has met with the developer on this and reviewed it and made some tweaks to it, and are confident that the proposal is consistent with outcomes that are in everyone's best interest. So it's really predominantly housekeeping, but lots of pieces of paper to make all of those things happen.
A thousandth of an acre is like 46 feet, right?
It's not much.
Isn't it? Like, seriously,
I want to get to that.
check me on that. It's pretty close. Any other questions on that item? Keep looking it up, because it's going to be signed your committee, and you need to know. Now we'll go to P&A, and anyone that would love to attend those from the public is welcome. That concludes our agenda, other than other business. Seeing none, comments from council members? Love it. We've had a long night. Thank you for all your patience, long agenda. And, I was 2 square feet off. Damn. Okay. Without objection, we are adjourned.
Bye, I'm ready. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Mayor.
I think you almost got yourself shot, Ryan, coming in that side.
Oh, you did?
We did.
Is that out the entrance?
No.